Today's topic is returning multiple values in Python. Introduction. In Python, functions can return multiple values. These values can be of different data types. This feature provides flexibility and can simplify code. Here is an example program. Basic syntax. To return multiple values, separate them with commas. The return statement is used to send the values back to the calling code. For example, return value 1, value 2, value 3. Here is an example program. Tuple packing. When multiple values are returned, they are automatically packed into a tuple. A tuple is an immutable sequence of values. The receiving code can unpack the tuple using assignment. Here is a flowchart which explains the tuple packing. Tuple unpacking. To unpack a tuple, simply assign its values to variables. The number of variables must match the number of values in the tuple. For example, value 1, value 2, value 3 is equals to function name. Here is an example flowchart. Returning lists. Functions can also return lists of values. The list can be created and returned in a single line of code. For example, return value 1, value 2, value 3. Here is an example program. Returning dictionaries. Dictionaries can also be returned from functions. The keys and values can be created and returned in a single line of code. For example, return key 1, value 1, key 2, value 2, key 3, value 3. Here is an example program.
Returning sets. Sets can also be returned from functions. Sets are unordered collection of unique elements. For example, return value 1, value 2, value 3. Here is the diagram for sets and functions. Returning customs objects. Function can return customs objects that are defined by the programmer. These objects can have attributes and methods that provide additional functionality. For example, return my object. Here is the example program. Using named tuples. Named tuples are a subclass of tuples that have named fields. They provide a way to define lightweight classes without defining a full class. For example, from collections import named tuple. Using classes. Classes can be used to define customs objects that can be returned from functions. Classes can have attributes and methods that provide additional functionality. For example, class myObject declare function init self value 1, value 2, value 3 parameters. Self value 1 is equal to value 1, self value 2 is equals to value 2, self value 3 is equals to value 3. Here is the example flowchart. Using generators. Generators are the functions that use the yield statement to return multiple values. They can be useful for generating large sequences of values. For example, define my generator yield value 1, yield value 2, yield value 3. Here is the example mind map. Using coroutines. Coroutines are the functions that can receive and return values multiple times. They can be useful for processing data streams. For example, define my coroutine while true value is equals to yield process of value. Handling errors. When returning multiple values, it is important to handle errors correctly. The receiving code should check for errors and handle them appropriately. For example, if is instance of result exception, handle error of result. Here is the example flowchart.
Best practices. When returning multiple values, use clear and descriptive variable names. Use tuples for simple groups of values and classes for more complex objects. Avoid returning mutable objects like lists or dictionaries unless necessary. And here is the example for tuples for returning multiple values. Advantages. Returning multiple values can simplify code and reduce the number of function calls. It can make code more readable and easier to understand. It can provide flexibility and allow for more complex data structures. And here is the example and its explanation. Disadvantages. Returning too many values can make code harder to read and understand. It can make functions more difficult to test and debug. It can lead to unnecessary memory usage and slower performance. And here is the example and its explanation. Conclusion. Returning multiple values in Python is a powerful feature that provides flexibility and simplifies code. It can be used to return tuples, lists, dictionaries, custom objects, generators, and coroutines. It is important to handle errors and use best practices to ensure clear and maintainable code. And here is the example program for how to return multiple values in Python. And here are some references. Python documentation, Real Python, Geeks for Geeks. We may get many doubts regarding this topic. Are there any limitations to returning multiple values in Python? When it is better to use a class instead of tuple or dictionary? How can I handle errors when returning multiple values? Thank you. Thank you for learning about returning multiple values in Python.